This one. Can you see the presentation? Okay. So good afternoon. I'm Lisa Capretti. I'm a postdoc at Tor Vergata University. And what I'm going to present today is a joint work with Francesca Centofanti, Alessio Farcomeni, and Furio Rosati from Tor Vergata as well. And it is a work about migration duration in Italy. Before going on, let me thank you for organizing and for giving me the possibility to present this paper. I don't know why it doesn't change. No, okay. Sorry, I don't, okay. It's a bit slow. Sorry, I don't know what happened. Let's start again. Okay, I'm sorry. So our work built on a rich theoretical literature that view international migration not only as a permanent phenomenon, but rather a temporary one, either with the intention of returning home after a while or moving to a third country. So we believe that understanding what drives these onward and return migration, and in particular when this return and onward migration happens, is really important to assessing the long run effect of immigration on labor market, on public finance, but also on the integration process in the host country. Despite this growing attention to temporary migration, we noticed that empirical evidence remains scarce, mainly due to data limitation, as I will explain in a while. So that is why we wanted to fill this gap and contribute to this literature. We decided to focus on Italy, first of all, because we are able to obtain a unique data set covering all the universe of immigrants in Italy, but also because Italy represents an important and interesting case. It is, in fact, a country that is characterized by a high level of immigration and a country where migration plays a central role in political debates. It also shares some similarities with the other Southern European countries, but at the same time is also quite a unique case because, as you probably know, Italy is characterized by strong disparities between areas, macro areas, and in particular between the northern part and the southern part. So we thought that this could be interesting to take into account in order to see whether different job opportunity, different cost of livings between this macro area can somehow affect the duration and the length of stay for migrants. So in this paper, we wanted to investigate out migration and also return migration from Italy. We focus on the period from 2011 to 2022. And specifically, we ask how long do migrants remain in Italy and what are the factors that affect their decision to stay or to leave Italy. We particularly pay attention to the role of wage differential between host country and home country. but also we took into account the preferences for amenities in the home country or in Italy. We also focus on the relative purchasing power, and as I said, we took into consideration local condition in Italy. So our contribution is twofold. First of all, this paper is one of the few papers that can exploit administrative records, where we found all information about each movement in Italy from municipality and to abroad and from abroad. And secondly, to the best of our knowledge, this is the first paper that look at the impact of the area of arrival specifically on the migration duration. Just to give you a preview of the results, we find a clear trend. First of all, we noticed that migrants either leave the country within 5 years after their arrival or tend to settle permanently, at least in our period of analysis. Concerning our finding related to out-migration, we noticed that migrants arrived in north of Italy tend to exit faster compared to the one that arrive in the south. And we also noticed that the local labor market condition and housing costs play a key role in explaining the immigration duration. Then we also try to see if there are some differences between the group that we call early leavers, so the one that remain in Italy less than 3 years, and the group that we call late leavers, so the one that stay in Italy at least 9 years. And what we notice is that when we look at individual factors, they differ among these two groups. Whereas when we focus on economic and non-economic factor, we notice that these factors are stronger for the group of late leavers. Concerning return migration, we also find that the individual factors are quite similar among the nationalities that we took in consideration. But then we find some heterogeneity between nationality when we look at economics and non-economic factors. As I said, the theoretical literature is quite well developed, but much has been said at the empirical level. And the main problem of existing studies is that they often rely on small data sets as ad hoc data set, mainly focusing on one specific nationality or some specific factor that explain duration. But the results that they find are not always easy to be generalized, because they are not able to capture the dynamics for the whole immigrant population. But the findings that emerge from the existing literature suggest that weak labor market attachment, but also wage differential and relative cost of living are important drivers of return. Some studies also see migration as part of our life cycle strategies with the intention of accumulating human capital. And other few studies also look at political factors and find that political instability and conflict affect the decision to return home or not. We base our framework on a modified version of the Dussman and Gorlak model, where at time t0, the migrant can choose whether to remain in the origin country, which give her utility VO, or can decide to migrate in a certain area of the country, obtaining a utility that can be VDI or VDJ, where I and J are two areas of the country of destination. Of course, for simplicity, we just took two areas, but can be extended. The model can be extended to take into account more than two areas. So at every subsequent period T, the migrant compare the utility of remaining in that area in the host country a period more, that is this VDI theta, with the value of returning home, that is this VOI theta. And this value depends on consumption, CT, the value of the assets, AT, the wage in the host country, WI or W, or W in the home country, and the relative prices between the two countries. And so intuitively, what we can say is that the migrant is more likely to return home if the wage differential is smaller, or if the preference for the home country's amenities that are this H in the model are higher, or when the purchasing power at home is stronger compared to the purchasing power abroad. So, as I said, we had the opportunity to exploit this data set that was provided to us through the Laboratory Adele by the ISTAT, the National Statistical Office, that cover the universe of movement for the period from 2011 to 2022. We focus, this data set is taking into account all the population, but we decided to focus on foreign-born people. And in this data set, for each observation, we observe the date of birth of that person, the sex, the country of birth, and the citizenship. And each row is a movement. So for each observation, we have also information about when that movement happened, so the month and the year, and the origin and the destination of that movement. So for instance, if we have a person that arrived from Albania to Rome, we have this information in this line, in a certain, for instance, September 2012. We have this information. So using the date and country of birth and the sex, we try to, yes, do you have questions?
Yes, sorry, Lisa, one question. Do you know, like, if this ID allows you to track if the person has, like, entered once some years ago and now enter again? Like, do you can see movements different times, or is just like cross-section and so on?
No, I'm going to explain you, but no, we can not go back in time before 2011, because we don't have the history of each observation. Each observation is just a movement. Then we try to recreate an ID, and we try to follow that ID. For instance, we have a certain person arrived starting from January 2011, and then we see that that person arrived in Rome, and then after 2 years they moved to Milan, and then after 3 years he or she go back to the home country. But we don't have the Istat did not provide the fiscal code, so we had to track the person. And when we found unique matches, we were happy. When we found some ambiguous matches, we decided to exclude that person to avoid ambiguity and problems. So after all this, tracking the person, we were able to reconstruct the migration history of around 3.7 million of foreign-born people. For the analysis from these 3 million, 4 million, we focus only on the cohort of entry in 2011, so around 270,000 of people, just to exploit the cohort that has the longest history, so that we can exploit all the period from all the 12 years in our period. So we complement this dataset with other data, because that in the dataset that I show you, we don't have information, for instance, about wages or other variables. So we decided to enrich that dataset using other micro and macro level variable. So we decided to use this variable for the year 2011 to avoid endogeneity problem. And so we use the average rent as a proxy for the cost of living in a certain local labor market. And we took this variable from the Osservatorio Immobiliare of the Italian Revenue Agency. We also have information about the income per worker for each local labor market. Then we use a dummy just to indicate whether the person is in an urban or rural municipality. And then we use some data from the World Bank at the macro level, one to proxy the relative cost of living, and the second one to take into account the GDP differential between Italy and the home country. Lastly, we also add some information about political instability using the Global Peace Index. That is an index that from 1 to 5, with 5 indicating higher political instability. We have a lot of descriptives in the paper. I will show you just a few of them. This one is again I will show you only the descriptive for the cohort arrived in 2011. What we can see is that by the end of our period, by 2022, around 20% of the people arrived in that year have left the country. And if we look when this happened, we can see that the majority happened in the first 5 years after the arrival. When we look at the nationalities, we can see that these are the main 5 nationalities present that lives in Italy. And we can see that some of them are more likely to exit. If you look at people from Romania and from China are more likely to leave Italy, while others are quite less likely to leave, like Albanian and Ukrainian migrants. When we look at by the age category, we can see that at the end of the period, more or less the percentage of people that exit Italy is quite similar. It's slightly higher for the migrants that arrive at older ages. And probably this is part of the strategy to accumulate saving before retirement. And the exit probability is a bit higher for male migrant compared to female. And if we look at the last panel, we have information about the likelihood of exit, of leaving Italy by major region of arrival. And we can already see from this descriptive that the majority of migrant exit from the north and in the center. These maps shows the arrival here at the left for each municipality, and at the right we have the departure from each municipality. These are the arrival in 2011. These are the departure for that cohort throughout the whole 12-year period. And what you can see is that a lot of arrival happened in the center and in the north, where the number of foreign-born arriving in the south is quite lower. But if you look at the departure, there is a strongest division, no? Where the highest number of departure are from the center and the north, whereas from the south we have almost no one that leave Italy. So as I said, we are interested in understanding not only whether the migrant remain or leave Italy, but the timing when they decide to leave Italy, and what factor affect the duration, the migration duration. In the data set that we have recreated, we have two main problems. One is related to the low event rate, because as I have showed before, at the end of our period, only 20% of the population arrived, foreign population arrived in Italy, decide to leave. And this can complicate the analysis. And the second problem is that we have some interval sensor data, because for some observation, we know that that person is no longer in Italy. But since in Italy, foreign-born people are not obliged to say to the municipality, I'm leaving Italy and I'm going in that country. So it can be that they just leave without saying anything. So the municipality now and then check whether the persons are still live in that municipality. And if they do not find that person, they cancel administratively. So we have a date when this happened, when this administrative cancellation happens, but it has to be taken as an upper bound. Because the departure happened some time before, but we ignore the exact moment when the departure happened. And of course, we can take this into account. We use some survival models that analyze the time until the event occur. And in our case, the event of interest is leaving Italy. Allowing at the same time to understand which characteristics affect this timing. Since we have this problem, of course, we cannot use the basic survival models. We have to use a set of different models. And the first type of model that we use is a parametric survival model. That is useful to assess how covariance affects the survival function, taking into account these interval sensor data. The only limitation of this parametric model is that it can be biased due to the low event rate. So it doesn't capture fully this low event rate. That is why we decided to add other models to obtain more precise estimates. So we use a split cure model, and we decided to use this type of model since the parametric may also overstate the eventual probability of exit. And this model assumed that the population consists of two groups, two subgroups, let's say. One that is the cured group that never experienced the event of interest, of leaving Italy. And the second group is a group that may eventually leave. So it's called a susceptible group. In addition to that, to this model, we add also a quantile survival regression that is more flexible, so it doesn't require any distributional assumption. And it also can give us more information because allow us to look at different parts of the distribution in terms of months spent in Italy. Lastly, since we have at least for a subgroup of person information about the destination country when they leave Italy, we also run a Fanning-Gray model, a competing risk model that take into consideration, first of all, we take into consideration one nationality group at the time, and we estimate the incidence of return migration, accounting for the fact that some other individual can have a competing event that in our case is going to a third country instead of returning home. Just to give you, so going to the results, these are the Kaplan-Meier estimate results that shows non-parametric estimates of the marginal survival curve. And in particular, this curve shows the percentage of people remaining in Italy after some months. And what you can see here in this graph on the left is that at the end of our period, so after 12 years, 80% of the foreign-born people are still in Italy. Another interesting thing that this graph shows is that the biggest part of people that leave Italy, as we have seen also in the table, in the descriptive table, leave it in the first 5 years after the arrival. We can see the 15% of people that leave Italy. The graph on the right instead look at the same Kaplan-Meier, but considering the area of arrival. And what it's interesting to see is that people arrived in the north, that is the green line, after 5 years, let's say 16% of people arrived in the north left Italy after 5 years. That is a higher percentage compared to the ones that arrived in the south, that are the pink one. Where for these people, after 5 years, only 8% of the arrival has left the country. These are the results of the parametric survival model. And what we can say is that males are more likely to leave compared to female, because we have this positive coefficient that means that female stay longer, remain in Italy longer compared to men. On the opposite, we have that younger people at arrival remain longer. Here, this is one. We see that the political instability at the origin country doesn't seem to have an impact on the timing of the departure. But the higher cost of living in Italy and the increase in the relative cost of living reduces the migration duration. Another thing that is interesting to notice is, again, related to this coefficient. Yes.
Sorry, Lisa, with a bit of a delay, but we were sent a question regarding the graph that you show with the share of people that is staying in Italy. And the question in particular is there some institutional feature that might explain why the rate of exit changes slopes after 60 months? Like, why is that threshold in 5 years?
Well, I don't think that there are any institutional measure. I think it's just what characterized the migration in Italy, at least what we have found. But we haven't found any institutional policy or something like that. What it's interesting to see by looking at regional heterogeneity in Italy is that if we look at the coefficient for the migrants arrived in the center or in the southern island, we can see that in all these cases, they tend to remain in Italy longer compared to the reference area, so the reference that is the one that arriving in the north of Italy. Okay. These are the results for the split cure model. We have this column that are the results for the group that we have called the permanent stayers, so that they do not experience the risk of leaving Italy. While the orange column is the one with the results for the group that eventually may leave the country. And what we can just see is that results are really similar to what I showed you before. So this model confirm what the parametric model said before. Okay. These are the results for the quantile regression. For the two first column, in these two columns, we have the results for the foreign people that outmigrate in the first 3 years, whereas this blue column are referred to the group that at the beginning I called late leavers, so the people that remain in Italy at least 9 years or more. What we can see here, so we can compare these groups, and by looking at the individual factors, we can see that the group behave in a really different way, because among the early leavers, female tends to stay longer compared to male migrant, whereas if we look at the other group, just the opposite. They tend to they are less likely to remain. And the reasoning is similar also for the age of entry. So older migrants are more likely to leave early among this group of early leavers, but among those who stay longer, they tend to remain longer. So this could be a strategy, if you arrive at an older age and you are planning to stay just a few years, this is more, I mean, you are more likely to you live faster. Whereas if you're planning to remain more, you exit slower. It's a bit complicated to understand, but I hope I gave an idea. If we look at the economic and non-economic factors, that are these two panels here, what we can say without going coefficient by coefficient is that the important thing is that the effect is always stronger for the group of late livers. Just an example, by looking at political instability. When political instability in the home country increases, we can see that in all groups, in all the groups, people tend to remain longer in Italy, but is okay. Thanks. I'm almost at it. And the effect is stronger for the last group when they stay more. Just to show you the result for the return migration, we decided to focus also on return migration because looking at the whole sample, we noticed that, at least for the one that we have information, 65% of them decided to come back home to the country of birth. So we focus on these 5 nationality group, and what we can see is that the individual factors exhibit the same effect for all of them, whereas if we look at other factors, we find a lot of heterogeneity. For instance, just looking at political instability, we find that for some groups, these negative coefficients means that it's more likely that migrants decided to go to a third country instead of returning home. But for instance, for Albanian, it's the opposite. So just to conclude, we try to investigate out migration and return migration using these unique data set complemented with other data at the micro and macro level. Our findings are mainly that migrants in our period of analysis tend to settle permanently or to live in the first 5 years. And we also noticed that migrants that arrive in northern Italy tend to live faster Italy and have a higher risk of returning home compared to going to other third country. And we stress the importance of local labor market condition and housing cost in explaining the migration duration. So thank you for listening. If you have any comments, you're welcome.
Okay, Lisa, thanks a lot for a wonderful presentation, super interesting. Now we can move to the discussion by Momita of 10 minutes, after which you can address the questions and also the questions in general that people can make within the panelists. Okay, Momita, you can share your screen and you have
Thank you
around
so much.
10 minutes.
Sure, okay. Please let me know if you can see my screen with the slides. Or
Yes, we can see.
okay. Oh, okay. Awesome. Okay, so thank you for this presentation. So I'm going to use my time to just sort of summarize and point out what I think are key contributions, and then just briefly touch upon a few points which I think might be useful for like a further discussion or even extension, if possible, of the paper. So So I just wanted to summarize what the paper is telling us. So this is one of the novel contribution is really that it's looking at migration duration and either return decision, migration decisions or onward migration decisions for these 3.7 million foreign-born individuals. And the core question is, what are the determinants of their decision making? So do they stay, return, or move on? And how does that change depending on where they land in Italy? And the papers used a whole host of empirical tools like parametric survival models, split-cure models, and quantile regressions. So in my eyes, some of the key contributions are first and foremost the data construction. So very non-trivial to construct these migration histories from this very detailed micro data, and of course made harder by the fact that I think you did not have an individual identifier, so you had to sort of construct it. And then you have a really large set of individuals to look at for this literature. Compared to other papers that focus on, say, Netherlands, that deal with a much smaller subset of individuals. So this is, I think, for Southern Europe, I think, as I think yourself mentioned, Lisa, it's like the first large-scale administrative evidence for Southern Europe on this question. I really like the within-country heterogeneity because in this literature, I've seen almost universally people treat the host country as like a single entity, but showing that variations in local wages and local rents changes things. So, for example, that local wages prolong stays while local rents accelerate departure. That's a very policy relevant result. Something that I found kind of surprising and potentially room for further exploration is the South Islands finding that you have longer stays there despite weaker economic indicators. So just thinking about what other quantitative data potentially can explain that. I also really like the split cure model. Personally, I was not familiar with this methodology or this literature, so I learned about it through your paper a little bit. And it's a great case because I think around 80% of the 2011 cohort remain. So there's a clear demarcation between survivors and non-survivors. I really liked the application to show that the determinants of permanent settlement are different from the determinants of when they leave. Also, again, like think very policy relevant. I also liked the alignment with the Kaplan-Meier curve. I thought that this was like a nice like internal validation thing. I also really liked another thing also that I've kind of seen in this literature is that out migration when people leave is again kind of treated homogeneously, but the fact that you've distinguished between returning back home, so that kind of out migration versus going somewhere else, like onward migration, I think that's also again very interesting and kind of one of the novel contributions. I'm going to spend like a short time just talking about what I think some of the points might be for further discussion or just thinking. So some of these are also kind of like questions for the presenter. So, feel free to like sort of stop me and answer or address them. So firstly, and I don't think that this is most important, but I think an obvious thing that comes up is, of course, this is a descriptive and a very well done descriptive paper. But I think if you could include in the paper some discussion of how we can move to a causal interpretation. So maybe something about using an IV with wages, or I think there are some papers in this field that look at quasi-random variation in the initial placement. I think there are some Scandinavian papers uh, Scandinavian market papers that do this. So, and if there is no sort of exogeneity in policy or variables that you can exploit, I think that's fine. But also just having that discussion of included in the paper of sort of what is necessary to make this causal and why you've not been able to do it. I think that itself, just that discussion, would be worth sort of writing up and having in the paper. My second, this is kind of a question, is that like your covariate values about cost of living and standards of living, local GDPs. From what I understand, you include the values from 2011, or rather like only at the entry period. And I know you mentioned in the discussion that this is to sort of avoid endogeneity problems. But however, I think that the endogeneity problems themselves are interesting. And maybe there's some variation there that you could leverage to get closer to a causal identification, because anyway, your panel is quite long. And over this long period, I imagine that things like wages and rents and amenities, perhaps even environmental amenities or political amenities, they would have changed. Then there's this like a little bit of a structural break also in like say 2019. So just thinking a little bit about whether using covariate values at one time point is really the right way to go. And even if it is the right way to go, if there is variation in those values that you can leverage to find like interesting sort of outcomes. And speaking of covariate values, adding other covariates also, like local political factors or local environmental factors, I think those might also be potentially interesting. This is more of like a data measurement robustness. Like the next question / comment I have is more of like a data robustness question. I think there was a wave of administrative cancellations, I think in 2013, that you mentioned you kind of left out, and that's fine, but just like wondering if you could have a robustness check excluding and including that sample of people, just to make sure that the results are not being driven by them. The other thing is, and maybe I'm kind of a little biased here because I work on temporary circular migration, but when you drop individuals with more than 3 movements, I understand that it helps to keep the data clean, but I think, and maybe you can like provide a little bit of light on this, if there is a culture of circular or seasonal migration, like people moving for work, and then moving back and coming back again, and so on and so forth, if that happens across borders, then I think if that happens, if you have sort of anecdotal data showing you that seasonal or circular migration is a thing, then maybe it would not be the best idea to drop individuals with more than 3 movements, because in that case, you're actually removing an important sort of segment of people. Finally, I know that right now you have no information on whether migrants are coming with their families, as far as I understand. And even if you do, you can't identify the whole family in the data. So I really liked the gender-based differentiation, the fact that males and females behave differently when it comes to return migration. But I think it would also be really nice if there could be some discussion about whether or not families are migrating together and when people are choosing to leave, if it's a question of the family splitting, returning or moving onwards, or do people who move with families typically stay, if they are the ones who are typically staying in Italy, who are sort of the survivors. I think if there is some way in which you could either find data or construct sort of proxy matches of people who might be family members. I don't know if this is at all possible. So if it's not, I mean, obviously it doesn't matter. But I think having that angle on family splitting versus, families staying together, I think that would also be like a really interesting and kind of important and potentially even a policy relevant angle, right? So these are sort of all the main comments I had. I'm happy to sort of quickly conclude by saying that I think that this is a very careful paper and very ambitious paper. And I think it makes a genuine contribution to the return migration literature, which is anyway, as we all know, um, relatively sparse. So I really liked the contribution in terms of both the data and the methods. The comments I've made are just like suggestive and just something for further consideration. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot for the discussion, Momita. So now, Lisa, if you want, you can comment on the comments, and if not, we can proceed also with questions from the audience.
Yeah, no, I want just to say to thank Momita for reading the paper and for her comments. Without going into detail of each of them, but yeah, just out of curiosity, we also wonder why people remain more in the south, and it actually seems that they are more satisfied than the one that arrived in the north. There are some reports that investigate this and report a higher satisfaction. And yeah, I mean, your comments about family splitting is really interesting, but we cannot reconstruct this because I mean the National Statistical Office have information on I mean have the fiscal code, so maybe they can, but for privacy reason we cannot access to that information. But anyway, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. Now we can bring a question that one of the attendees made. So this question, Lisa, is by Paul Elguezabal, sorry. He asked, you could include people who enter until 2014, 2015. Do you think the results will hold?
Yes, thanks for the question. We, in the appendix, we try to run again the model for the cohort of people entered in 2013 and in 2016 to see if the results hold. They hold for the cohort of 2013. They slightly changed for the other cohort, but it just also because probably we lose a lot of information because we have observation until 2022. Then we don't know when the people arrived, if they left later on. So the results slightly change, but.
Thanks, Lisa. So for the moment, there is not question. Let's wait for a second. I would like to do a question to take the chance. I was going to ask Lisa, so how do you think like, I don't know about the time periods, exactly about the timing, but do you think like there is any chance that this difference in outmigration might be due to the natives? I mean, like attitudes towards migration, maybe in some places they are more reluctant to welcome people. I don't know, maybe in the north there is more of these movements. I don't know, like how do you think that this might affect?
It may be, but in the report that I said before about the dissatisfaction of migrants arrived in the south, that report also showed that natives are not so welcoming in the south and are not happy about migrants in the south as well. So it's weird. Despite the fact that they are not so welcome, they prefer to live in the south.
Okay, thanks. So let's wait for some extra questions. Okay, I think there is not extra questions. Given the time, we are almost in time, so I think we can close now, Kartika. Uh, yeah, I think we have some connection problems. So what we can do is that I can close. Thanks a lot. Yes. Thanks a lot, Lisa, for your presentation. Thanks a lot, Momita, for your presentation. For the discussion, sorry. We are back after the break. We're going to be back on the 7th of April, date in which Momita will present. And of course, everyone, please feel welcome to attend. I will send now the presenters also a feedback form, and well, we appreciate the attendance of everyone in the crowd. So thanks a lot, everyone, and we can meet in 1 week. So I will stop the recording. Okay. 1 second. Yes, that's it.